So I say we kick this off with a little bit of this silly. I haven't even watched this video, but I've been reading about this trend, this whole Roman Empire thing. There's some interesting poll numbers around this question of do you think about the Roman Empire? And I think a lot of people are missing why, but men know Rome fell, and they know why Rome fell.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking historically speaking, at the time when the Roman Empire was at its peak, everywhere you walked around, the statues were very masculine men, warriors. By the end of the Roman Empire, most of those statues were actually very feminine men. Right. And so it's kind of based off this concept that hard times make strong men, strong men make good times make weak men, and the cycle repeats itself. And so as we're coming up on the end of a 100-year demographic economic cycle post World War II, after the crash in 1929, and then moving into World War II, and started in the 30s and really hit full capacity in the 40s. That's where we're at today. A generation has come and gone from this world, and so that's the trend. But then it also has become kind of funny as well. So I think we're going to start with this video.
Yeah, we're starting this video.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Never.
Never?
No.
I mean, meaning like annually, maybe.
What a description.
Annually? Okay.
An influence?
Anything about
Or
it?
just like the name Julius Caesar.
Anything about the Roman Empire?
Yeah, like that includes like Colosseum, or maybe 5 times a year.
5 times? Yeah?
Yeah. If you include everything, not just like
Everything.
anything Roman, like even just like a gladiator.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're not talking about the actual, the breadth and influence of the empire itself, which is more like a concept.
He's just rambling.
Yeah. So the concept once a year,
Yeah.
and then anything 5 times a year.
Yeah. Anything like related.
Okay.
This video
share
is
it.
really an 18-minute long video on this.
No, I don't think so. This is like a compilation.
Okay.
Okay. Me? Never.
No, how long did you think about the Tang Dynasty?
Never. How often do you?
Maybe every 3rd year.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
I don't know, at least twice a day.
What?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Twice a day?
And that is a great note to open up today's episode on.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think if you read the Bible, you probably think about the Roman Empire probably more often than not. But conceptually, yeah, I think it's a funny trend, but I think it's top of mind because Rome was one of the great empires that fell from grace,
Right.
And so nobody really talks about it anymore other than in the context of the rise and the fall. And so all nations tend to run that risk. And we've talked about it on the podcast before, but I think that, America is unique in the sense that we are kind of special. We have more navigable waterways, more farmland, more resources. We have a more unified country than any other country in the entire world, right? So one of the reasons that like communism persists in China is because they need the Eastern China resources for the Western China.
Right.
But they're actually literally worlds apart in the sense that there's not an easy way to get from Eastern to Western China. And they speak a different dialect. It's a different, though it's Chinese or Mandarin, it's different. And so in order to hold that together tightly, you need to rule with an iron fist in order to make that happen. In the United States, one of the things that allows us to have capitalism is the fact that you can go from San Diego to New York and generally share a lot of the same values, speak the same language, maybe with a different accent, So.
Well, what's interesting about this is that it's a trend now, right? It's a trend for people to go around, for women to go around and ask their boyfriends, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? But in a couple of these articles here that we'll cover, we're going to kind of jump through them. There's just certain points that I want to pull out about this discussion. There's two sides that seem to emerge when on either side of this trend. One side of it's like men are fascinated by the architecture and the aqueducts and the beauty of Rome. And then you have people like this gentleman here who is, in all honesty, if you were to ask me, do I think about the Roman Empire? Yes, I do. But I don't think about the aqueducts.
No way.
No way.
I'm thinking about gladiators, warriors, ruling territory. They were highly sophisticated for their time.
Yeah, so you have, it's far less about, so let me jump into the article here, and then we'll touch on that. The article comes from Jack Williams. He is at Michigan State University. He's a journalist at Michigan State University. And he says, do men really think about the Roman Empire? Experts from Michigan State and students weigh in. He says, power, intention, violence. Not only do these traits lay the foundation of the Roman Empire, but they also seem to be the reason why the once great civilization now lives, as TikTokers put it, rent-free in men's heads. This new trend, which has swept across social media in recent weeks, is simple. Women ask men, typically their boyfriends or spouses, how often do they think about the Roman Empire? To which many men reply, constantly. However, people are questioning if men actually think about the empire that much, why they're so interested, and more recently, what their own Roman Empire is. A survey conducted by YouGov found that 4% of men aged 18 and older think about the Roman Empire most days, and 14% of men think about it once a month. On the other hand, 0% of women 18 or older think about it most days, while 10% think about it once a month. The guy who was a part of this, the professor, says that people tend to look to the readings of ancient Stoics to find peace within a tumultuous time. Many of these Stoic values are associated with Roman masculinity. People are also drawn to male leadership models in Roman history. He pointed out the famous example of Mark Zuckerberg's fascination with the Emperor Augustus. Lee, another contributing professor, says the aqueducts were so well engineered, the fact that they were able to transport water up and down hundreds of feet of elevation with no machines helping to pressurize is pretty sick. But the interesting piece of this, and the last statement here from Professor K, is Rome and classical Greece never really go away, even if the echoes of earlier modern resuscitations of their culture become illegible because of changes in the educational system. That's a statement, Professor K. It's just a matter of time before someone notices that Sparty's helmet is Roman and not classical Greek. So I kicked us off with that because, as I was saying, there's these three sides. There's, the masculinity, the virtues, the oomph behind it, the vast expanse of the empire, all that it accomplished, and then the downfall. And here, just to revisit this stat, it says 4% of men aged 18 or older think about the Roman Empire most days. 14% of men think about it once a month. On the other hand, 0% of women 18 and older think about it most days, while 10% think about it once a month. And this is kind of a nebulous topic to kick us off with, but it struck me as I was preparing for this episode of just, these are tumultuous times. And so in one sense of it, it is the masculinity piece, but I would be willing to bet, and bet with the audience and you, that most people are really contemplating, are we the Roman Empire in the last stages? Mm-hmm. That would be what I submit. But I wanted to know, do you think about the Roman Empire?
I mean, not directly, but I would say that the things that men tend to think about are directly influenced by the Roman Empire. Mm-hmm. So, at least in my world, obviously, sports is a hot topic, right? Mm-hmm. So, the gladiator of the day is the man in the arena, right? The athlete. So that's on our mind. Mm-hmm. Intellectual growth, right? As an entrepreneur, you're constantly growing and evolving, and it is a bit of a daily war and battle that's going on. And you have to, the modern day academics that we have today were strongly influenced by the Roman Empire and how they thought about education and the importance of it. In the context of where we're at economically, for sure. In the context of where we're at socially, for sure. And then the maybe the hubris associated, to use a Roman Greek word, of that we just think we're just so amazing that we can't fall down, or it's our need to go get involved in wars around the world and, basically police the entire world. I think that's a bit of a farce. And so that will inevitably be the thing that, takes us out because we're not keeping our own house in order, right?
Yes.
So.
Interesting. What I think about most, excuse me, what I think about most, not being a Roman historian by any means, is I do know that being familiar with some historians of Rome, what actually was the destruction of Rome at its core was that the citizens of Rome, they essentially lost their cultural identity.
Yep.
And that's what actually, so I guess we're part of the 14%. But when I think about Rome, that's what I'm actually contemplating for you guys listening is this empire, this vast expanding empire began to crumble from the inside out because its people lost sight of who they were and what they were to be as a nation.
It's a lot of what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
The American ideals, so compare that to coming out of post-World War II.
Yeah.
So post-World War II was actually one of the highest times for American pride in our country ever. It was the time when immigrants, because there was tons of immigrants coming over during this time period. That was when my grandfather, we weren't here 100 years ago, right? My grandfather came over to Ellis Island by way of Greece. He was a Greek American, right? So post-World War II in this, American pride era, we had just defeated a totalitarian government or regime, took out Hitler, right? We dropped the hyphen. So we were no longer Greek Americans, Italian Americans. We were just Americans. In fact, on my mom's side of the family, they were Italian. They spoke Italian. My grandfather was so proud to be an American. He did not allow anybody to speak Italian outside of the home. And people think like, oh, it's because they were hated on. It's like, not according to my family history. He was so grateful for what he had in this country that he felt it was a disrespect to speak Italian when we're here in America. We should be speaking American or English. Right? So it's a different perspective than where we're at today. And I think that generationally is what happens is you lose sight of that, right? They say history doesn't repeat itself, but it tends to rhyme. And that a lot of that's because we're not educated on what happened before us, right? We've seen if you look historically speaking, the cycle that we're in right now, you can compare and contrast that to what happened in Rome.
Yes.
And there's a great book called The Fourth Turning, if you haven't read that talks all about this topic of generational cycles and how this has happened over and over and over again. Now, do I think we're going to come out the other side as a country better? I do. I think a lot of that's going to come down to the people that listen to this podcast, to the entrepreneurs who are in the game right now, which predominantly are made up of millennials, because we're closest to it. And as a matter of circumstance, we have a responsibility to take it on head on because it impacts us the most politically, financially, our business, our families. And so you have a whole generation of millennials that are rising up into politics positions. Just look at like Vivek Ramaswamy is a good example, right? There's a 30-something-year-old man running for president. When was the last time you saw that? Not in my lifetime. I don't ever remember any 30-year-olds running for president.
No, I don't think Barack was 30-something. He was in early 40s, I believe.
Yeah. So things are changing, and we're going to come out of it. It's going to be a tumultuous probably 7 more years as we move through this election cycle on to the next one, 2030. All baby boomers will be over the age of 65. They'll all be retired at that point in time. Yeah. And so the torch will be passed. And so, hang on. It's going to be rough. But I think the other lesson we can take out of that too is just culture inside of your business, right? I have seen great companies fall apart because their culture falls apart. Yeah. And they think it's, a tagline on the wall, right? Or ping pong tables or beer on Fridays. But the truth is culture, if you have to say it, it's not culture, right? It's an identity. It's people that are bought into it. And I think that a lot of what breaks down companies culturally is the misalignment of who they hire and the values that they bring in. Yes. They hire people based off of their skill set without leading with their values first, which would deter people who aren't a good values fit. If you're offended by my values, you could have the skill set, but you're not going to apply, right? Yeah, but if you have the values alignment and the skill set, you're going to apply. I'm not going to reject you because your values don't align. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
But there's this separation between, we'll call it the sacred and the secular, like your personal belief set and business. Like, we can't talk about it.
Right.
I'm not going to make a decision on your skill set based off of that. But if I talk about it, then I'm going to attract the right kind of people.
You hit the hammer on the head, you know, because I said cultural identity. What I should have said is natural identity. It entails culture, but you hit it exactly on the head. And, you know, before we go into the next topic, we just saw a perfect example of this this week with Gavin Newsom selecting the replacement for Dianne Feinstein. He chose LaFonza Butler. Now, that would, any other day, it's like, oh yeah, he chose and replaced her. But no, she's the first openly LGBTQ person and third black woman. That's how she's being billed as taking this spot.
Right. Forget actual credentials.
Forget actual credentials. And, you know, there's interviews out there of, you know, Joy Reid asking him, are you going to fulfill your promise to put a black woman in that position? And it's like, what? Like, what kind of nonsense, as you talk about, you know, of like, oh, we're gonna meet these quotas instead of people who can actually deliver on the job for our people and expect that.
And the one thing that nobody wants to talk about, and I'm just going to say it, but they don't call it a religion, but that whole alphabet mafia is a religion.
Oh, 100%.
So if we just hired somebody because they were Christian and they were black, we would be called racist or religion, separation of church and state. Separation of church and state only applies to the political arena. It doesn't apply to your business.
No.
And so as entrepreneurs, like 50% of the population is going to love you, 50% is going to hate you.
Yeah.
But your vibe attracts your tribe, and you cannot grow a great company if you're constantly battling or shelving your own personal values to just pander to the people around you because you're worried about offending somebody. The other people aren't worried about offending you.
Yeah, and the interesting thing that has struck me with this, it's so, man, we can go so deep on this, is that some people are celebrating this, right? They're like, yeah, we got someone. But the thing is, the question we should be asking as people who fund these people's salaries is, will this person be able to deliver in the job responsibilities that they have?
Right.
Also, does this person actually represent the best interests of Californians? We don't know that, but I knew at the time of being selected, she was living in Maryland. You know, like, these are things that matter, and people are like, finally, you know, and it's just like, it's like, but that's that thing. It's the same thing that happened to Rome, you know, at the time of the demise, the gradual demise, you know, they didn't just have Romans there. They had all kinds of different people groups, foreign groups, people that did not adhere and appreciate the country, people that wanted to see the country destroyed within the own borders of the country.
Growth and destruction end up the same way, gradually, then suddenly.
Yeah.
And it's not until it's like ripped out from underneath you look back and you could see everything setting up, unless of course you're looking for it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, I think Rome probably thought they were, you know, untouchable. Right.
Well, listeners, do you think about the Roman Empire? And if you don't, you probably should. We're going to move on to the next topic here as we sort of wrap this to a close. So the next topic I want to talk about is the looming government shutdown that we saw curtailed a little bit. We got a little bit of time before we have to deal with this issue once again. It got me thinking, most people probably aren't really contemplating what a government shutdown is and what, you know, why it happens, what happens when that occurs, those kinds of things. And so I want to give us a quick little rundown. And then there is a clip of a representative, member of Congress, doing something pretty foolish. And some people are saying he was doing it to stall the vote. He claims he was doing it to go vote. And we're going to cover that. And so I'm just going to give a quick rundown. So this comes by way of Brookings Institute. They have a great article, and we'll drop a link of it in the description, that just goes through why why do they even happen? And so I'm going to not read this whole article to you guys, but just know when Congress fails to cover its annual appropriation bills, there's 12 of them, federal agencies must cease all non-essential functions until Congress acts. So if they can't come together to figure out how we're going to handle the money, a government shutdown happens. Now, what happens when that occurs? So during shutdowns, federal employees are told not to report for work, though under a 2019 law, they get paid retroactively when the shutdown ends. Government employees who provide what are deemed essential services such as air traffic control and law enforcement continue to work, but don't get paid until Congress takes action to end the shutdown. So they're working for free. All this applies to roughly only 25 to 30% of federal spending, subject to annual appropriation by Congress. Yada yada yada. But here's what you should know. Excuse me. So here's what you should know about this situation. In June 2023, with the backing of Republican leaders in the House, Congress passed and President Biden signed this into law, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which lifted the ceiling on federal debt and set limits on annual appropriated spending, one for defense, one for non-defense, for the fiscal year 2024 and 2025. At the same time, expectations were that this settled the overall size of the appropriation bills, and Congress would pass 12 bills that added up to the agreed-upon levels. So they're giving us some backdrop here. The main thing you should know is, so when the government shuts down, a bunch of people are going to go work for free, and a bunch of people are potentially not going to work at all. But at the core of a government shutdown is fiscal irresponsibility, and I would say fiscal conflict.
Yep.
And so what I want to broach on with you is how do we as Americans think about this continuous thing, this continuous, it's always been a risk of happening. Last time we saw it was 2019. We're seeing it. We saw it happen last summer. We were on the verge of another one. Now we have this one. What can you share with the people that, just from the perspective of how to think about this, the cyclical nature of this and how they have to process this?
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but, kind of piggybacking off what we were just talking about, government programs and government spending like this to create public services always end up the same way. It's a big part of why Rome falls the way that it does. I wonder, and I don't know this to be true, but I wonder pre-World War II, pre-stock crash, 1929, Great Depression, how many government programs were in place then compared to what it is today? I have no idea. But I venture to say it's much, much lower. There was, and you can, and I don't know this to be true, but just speaking about like my grandparents' generation, like they knew how to do things that we don't know how to do. Garden, can, cook, hunt, mechanical things, trades were much more prevalent. So there was a lot more self-sufficiency and less reliance on the government. Now, I'm not saying, do away with all, government agencies and do away with, police officers and fire departments and, some of the programs that do exist are really good and important. But I am saying that it is getting out of hand and they're not treated like a business, right? And so this is the concept. There's two camps of economics. You have Austrian economics, laissez-faire, small government, and then you have the Keynesian camp, which is the government is responsible for regulating the market, which they can never do well because everybody has the best of intentions until they realize they can vote themselves a raise. And it ends the same way every single time. Yeah. If they had to act a lot more like how entrepreneurs have to act, which is you make a good product, people buy it. You make a crappy product, people don't buy it. You mismanage your money, you go bankrupt, right? Then I think things would be much, much different. And so the people that are basically at the forefront of this bickering and divisiveness are probably the people that most likely need to be checked, which is, hey, and I think Warren Buffett said it, he said, I can fix the government fiscal policy in one move, which is if you don't meet budget, you don't get paid, right? And that's the problem is there's no repercussion for if they get it wrong or if they miss. So you got a bunch of people who have no skin in the game all arguing about what we should do. Meanwhile, government shutdown happens. They're still getting paid. Right? So it doesn't really affect them. No. So the wrong people are out there trying to solve the problem. And that's kind of the root of it. I don't have all the answers to it, but we've built a system on Keynesian economics, which is essentially this concept which is the trickle-down effect. You throw money at the top of the funnel and it trickles down to help people at the lower levels from a status class, right? But truthfully, people who are closest to the money are the ones that get the most benefit from it, right? I forget what that effect's called. There's a name for it. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of laissez-faire. I'm a big fan of small government, an advocate for Austrian economics. A guy who I listen to quite a bit on the topic is Peter Schiff.
Yep.
And he's a huge advocate for that. And he's a huge advocate for Americans and people in general just taking control of their own financial house so that these things don't really impact you, you know?
And that was actually the point I wanted to wrap on, which was Americans taking responsibility for their own financial house. But also, we have there's this notion, there's like a vague notion in people's minds here in America that Washington is just this apparatus that runs this nation. Yeah. And that is the farthest thing. That's the farthest reality. That is the worst reality you could have of having a separate entity that's responsible for the sustainability of this nation when it's a republic for a reason.
100%. One of the things, have you heard about the Convention of States? Do you know what this is?
Oh, the recent thing where they're like looking at.
Do you know what a Convention of States is?
No.
So there is.
In what context? Like
a Convention of States is
around the
when
Constitution.
Correct.
Okay.
The Convention of States is the one time when you can call a Convention of States when you have a certain number of states that all agree to come together and vote, and Congress is not allowed to participate, and they can essentially change the bill. And the Convention of States movement is really kind of grassroots, but it's gaining a ton of momentum. Their whole mission is to do some of those things that we just talked about, which are to put like term limits on Congress, right? And to fix some of these problems by like backdooring it. And that whole reason the Convention of States structure exists was for exactly the moment in time that we're in right now, where a small handful of people control the decisions for the entire 365 million people that make up the United States.
Yes.
Because our forefathers knew that this was going to happen. Yeah. Now, a Convention of States has never happened before, but because of that, these groups of people are actually going together and running mock Convention of States. Like, how would we do it? What would the process look like? What is our system to do this to ensure that it is a success? And so in doing that, they're getting smarter. They're understanding the proclivities of that model, and then they're putting people that are like territory managers in to build these grassroots movements. And so I'm a part of the Convention of States. I'm not as involved as I want to be, but I'm in the know about what's happening. And if you don't know about it, you're listening to this pod and this stuff bothers you and you want to change it, that is probably one of the best ways to go take action is join the Convention of States.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Roger that. Okay, well, let's wrap up today with a video. So at the same time, we have the government shutdown. There was a looming vote that needed to happen on Saturday by midnight.
Yep.
This gentleman's the talk of the town right now because during the day's events, Representative Bowman from New York decided to pull a fire alarm.
Wow.
While some of the proceedings were taking place.
Isn't that a crime?
It definitely is a crime. It's like a felony.
Wow.
But there were claims coming out of his camp of it wasn't intentional and he just wanted to vote. And so we'll finish off with our listeners with a clip of this gentleman. Now, granted, for context, it does come by way of Fox News. Actually, I have two versions. This one comes from Forbes Breaking News. But just
doesn't matter how you skin the cat.
It really doesn't.
Maybe he was like, "It's getting hot in here."
Well, you need some Celsius, bro.
What they're gonna do, because that's what they do. But I'm not worried about that.
So you said that your comms staff released a statement without you being aware that they used the term Nazi. You didn't see that statement before it ran?
I didn't know, but as soon as I saw it, I sent out the tweet that retracted it and made my position very clear.
Mr. What do you say to folks who say it's just not believable that you would think a red fire alarm was an exit? How could you possibly get that mixed up?
Yeah, I mean, it's all good. They could have their opinion, but I know I was in a rush to get to my vote, and I tried the door, it didn't work, so I pulled the alarm thinking it would open. That didn't work, so I went downstairs. It was a dumb choice, but, it is what it is. I take full responsibility for it, and now trying to move on, just do my job.
But why would you think a fire alarm would get you out of the door?
Listen, I tried the door. It says it's emergency exit. You push on it, it would open. I tried that. It didn't work. and I tried the alarm to jar the door. I've done that in
No,
other places,
no, it
and
didn't.
it worked. It
You
just
made
didn't
that
work
up.
this
So
time.
most people see an emergency exit, they can take another exit.
I mean, listen, at the end of the day,
I think
wasn't trying to
I think the
prevent
first thing we
the
should worry
shutdown.
about is the
Government
fact
do
that
anything. It was a bad
regardless,
decision. It was a mistake. Took responsibility
you're
for
that
it.
dumb.
You know, I don't know why it's gotten this much attention. You know, we got to.
You're that dumb that you didn't know the fire alarm that you were going to pull was going to set off the fire alarm. Come on now, man.
I'll have
Right.
more to say.
So either you're an
Decisions
idiot
made
or
in
you're
terms
just
of
lying to
what
save
happened
face.
with the
Right.
investigation.
Now let's just
But right
say
now, I'm not gonna say too much.
he pulls it and it
Police
opens
telling
the
you about
door.
the state of their investigation.
That doesn't
still
deal
don't
with
know.
the fact that you're still going to
to the
stall the
Capitol
event.
Police, the Sergeant at
You
Arms,
won't
who
be
else?
able to go
Yes.
vote.
Right.
So what's the outcome?
And Leader
The outcome on
Jeffries.
both sides is I can stop.
how's that
I can
fixed?
buy
How's that
myself
fixed?
time by pulling this alarm.
Yep.
Because if you were going to get out the door by way of pulling the alarm, you're still going to have to stop because you don't just get to pull an alarm and then be like, oh, my bad, and it's back on, and we're quiet now.
And like if we're just being logical, how far did he have to walk to get to a non-exit?
that place is super connected.
Yeah, so he maybe had to walk. It maybe took him an extra 2 minutes to get to the actual door.
Right.
Come on now, man.
Right. So that was just an interesting piece. There's articles we were going to dive into, but honestly, like, I leave our audience with this. There are a lot of things happening that you can trust your common sense. We just want to advise you that you can trust your common sense. I know there's going to be people that get emotional and feel certain types of way about your positions, but it's okay to say that was a questionable move.
Yeah, regardless of what camp you're standing on, if that would have been a Republican, I would say the same thing. I'll say this too, that keep your house in order.
Yeah, come on.
Nobody is responsible for your house, your business. The government's not coming to save you. They can't even save themselves.
Dude, can I, on top of that, double on top of that, of just getting your house in order? Like,
Yeah.
let me leave you with this, because we got to leave. But how do people begin to get their house in order? Like,
From personal
yeah, I think let's just say from a fiscal standpoint, like,
in business?
yeah, like how do we begin to even have this conversation about how I get my house in order? Because it's one thing to say get it. I know I need to get it, but how do I begin to potentially just think about going about getting it in order? And that might be a loaded question.
It's a loaded question. I mean, for me, it's always been about delayed gratification in the sense that I'm the last person to get paid in every business that I own. I'm typically the least paid individual because I'm trying to stock away as much cash as possible and trying to leverage as little debt as possible. But that doesn't mean I don't have lines of credit open. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to strategically use debt in order to grow the business. But it has to be for revenue creating activities, right? Not wants versus needs. And it's a constant battle. We deal with it in our personal life. You're going to deal with it as an entrepreneur as well. It doesn't go anywhere. But I think that the longer you can delay gratification and you can surround yourself with the right team and reinvest into people and revenue creating activities, sales, marketing, then you can create this flywheel effect where you can, I don't want to say print cash, but consistently have more predictable revenue. And then at that point, you get the first level of freedom, which is time freedom, which then takes you to the next level, which is money freedom. And when you get to that place, you have a lot of options on kind of what your next moves are. But if you are redlining it, then you're going to be putting yourself in a position, I'll call it a gun to your head, where in the event that something does go wrong, you have no leg to stand on, and your only option is to bow out. The game is infinite, so it takes longer than you probably think that it's going to take, but less time than you probably think that it's going to take. I actually wrote a post about this morning, which is talking about being consistent. Most people, if they do things long enough, will inevitably be successful. Just be consistent. Problem is, most people don't know what consistency actually looks like. Is it a month? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? No, probably not. It's probably like 3 years in order to get consistent. So long that it would probably be unreasonable for them to, it's more unreasonable for them to quit than it is for them to keep going. And so when you do things that put yourself in a position that force you in a position to quit, that's a bad move. And you can feel it. You know it internally. So manage your cash on your balance sheet is probably the best way to avoid any kind of chaos and disorder in your business. And winter is always coming. You just don't know when.
That's good. That's good. Until next time, folks, take care.
Peace.